If you're interested in starting a podcast, visit the contact page at njcriminalpodcast.com and send Meg a message. She'd love to discuss your legal podcast. If you sell by referral, relationship building, and network marketing, pick a time and let's talk about podcasting. You might be surprised. When done correctly, all you have to do is have the conversations.
It's almost a misnomer when they call us defenders, or, public defenders, because oftentimes the cases are so strong against our clients that much of the work that we do is really just kind of really representing our clients and making sure that their rights are being protected as well. And a lot of the work that we do is mitigation work in these cases because the case against them by the U.S. attorney is so strong.
Welcome to the NJ Criminal Podcast.
Welcome back to New Jersey Criminal Podcast. Today I am speaking with Orlando Nieves, a senior investigator for the Federal Public Defender's Office based out of the New Jersey District Camden Division. Orlando, welcome.
Hi, Meg. Thanks for having me on.
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me about who you are and what you do. So tell me how it is that you became an investigator for the Federal Public Defender.
Okay, so I've been with the office for 25 years, and it was kind of a blessing when I started. I was a psychology major out of Rutgers in Camden, and I had been working for a few years at a few different community agencies in the Camden area, doing more social services, human services type work. But my older brother was an attorney with the State Public Defender Office based in Camden. And he had always kind of asked me if I would be interested in doing that type of work. They had investigators in the state office as well. And so I had indicated to him that I was interested. And then a family friend, actually, who was working with the federal defender in Philadelphia, kind of told me about an opening in the New Jersey office, in the District of New Jersey office in the Camden division, the Camden branch office. He kind of asked me if I'd like to apply for the job, that they were really looking for someone and hoping to possibly find someone who was bilingual, Spanish speaking. And I applied. After a couple of interviews, I was very fortunate to get the job working in Camden, and that was kind of the beginning for me.
The rest is history, right?
The rest is history, yes.
It's unusual sometimes these days to hear about someone staying at one particular job for a couple decades. That I think that speaks volumes for the fact that you must enjoy what you do. Where are you originally from?
So I'm born and raised in Camden. I spent most of my youth and up until my young adult life living in Camden. So I'm very familiar with the community in Camden, and grew up there. And now I live still in Camden County, but I'm Camden born and raised. So.
Had you always wanted to stay, kind of close to home, so to speak?
Yeah, I never really thought about it too much. Camden's always been a part of my life. My parents lived in Camden until they passed away a couple of years ago. So I've just always remained pretty close to the community, and all of my work since graduating college has always been based in Camden. So I've always worked kind of based in the city, although my job now as an investigator kind of takes me all over the state, but I've always been close to Camden.
Right. I was just going to say that. I mean, certainly the work that you're doing extends beyond, the city limits, so to speak. But I would imagine that on the occasion when you are working on a case, and it's always helpful, I think, to be familiar with geographically the community and people in the community. I think that's a huge help.
Yeah. We have basically, our office has 3 branch offices. We have an office in Camden, an office in Trenton, and an office in Newark. I'm based out of the Camden office, and much of my work is covering all of South Jersey, from Camden, Gloucester County down to Atlantic County, Cumberland, Cape May, etc. So most of my work is in the South Jersey area, but sometimes my work will take me to Central Jersey or North Jersey, and of course on occasion sometimes I have to travel out of state depending on if there's work that I need to do elsewhere regarding a case here in New Jersey. So yeah, I have to be kind of all over.
Explain for our listeners what it is that the Office of the Federal Public Defender does and the types of cases that the attorneys handle in conjunction with basically how the U.S. Attorney's Office typically gets to pick the cases that they want to prosecute. How does that impact what you do?
So our office, we're assigned by the federal courts to represent clients who are unable to afford private counsel. So we're assigned by the courts, and we do all federal criminal cases. So we get everything from, of course, drug cases, gun cases, white collar crime of all types of fraud, etc. Kidnappings. In recent years, of course, there's been a lot of increase in cases involving like sex trafficking, child pornography, etc. So, and of course, we get a lot of immigration cases as well. But it's all federal criminal cases, and the U.S. attorneys on the federal level, the U.S. Attorney's Office or the prosecutors at the federal level, they kind of get to, I think, pick and choose their cases a little bit more. So when it comes to things like drug cases and gun cases, it's typically on the federal level. It's going to be cases involving large quantities of drugs or firearms or large operations, large sting operations involving drugs, firearms, etc. So they kind of get to pick and choose their cases a bit more, and those are typically the type of cases that I work on the defense side.
Yeah, I was a county prosecutor for a number of years, and for a part of that time, I dealt with a lot of the drug cases, and we had some pretty large wiretap cases that we, pitched to the U.S. Attorney's Office to take. And, I think you're exactly right. They typically won't get involved in a case and take over a case from the county unless you're talking really, really big numbers and really, really large quantities of drugs. So at the point in time, I would imagine that your office is defending someone. They're the biggest cases, and correct me if I'm wrong. Typically, my experience is that the U.S. Attorney's Office usually takes cases that are strong, at least from their perspective. Does that make it difficult for you guys in terms of doing what you need to do to defend folks?
It really does, Meg. It's and that's exactly right. Particularly, and every district around the country is a little bit different. But here in New Jersey, the U.S. Attorney's Office here in New Jersey, they do not bring charges very lightly. Meaning, they normally, when they bring charges against someone, they've done their homework, they've done their investigation, and they typically have a very strong case against the defendant. It's good for them, but unfortunately it makes our work very difficult and can often be very frustrating. So, I often say a lot of the work that we do, I mean, it's almost a misnomer when they call us defenders, or, public defenders, because oftentimes the cases are so strong against our clients that much of the work that we do is really just kind of really representing our clients and making sure that their rights are being protected as well. And a lot of the work that we do is mitigation work in these cases because the case against them by the U.S. Attorney is so strong.
Yeah, that's got to be very challenging. How many investigators are there in the Camden division?
So our office in Camden we're a pretty small office. We have currently 2 investigators and 1 paralegal. We have about 12 attorneys in the office total. So our office is relatively small. Our largest office is our Newark office, and they have several more investigators there and paralegals and a larger number of attorneys. But my branch office in Camden, we're relatively small, which is, I think, a good thing. We work exceptionally well together as a team. And I've been blessed in my 25 years working with this office to work with just an amazing group of people, such dedicated professionals and attorneys, investigators, paralegals, support staff, IT staff. I mean, everyone just really cares about what they do, and they really care about representing the clients in a very positive and strong way. And everyone's just so dedicated to the job. So I've been pretty blessed that way.
That's great. Do the attorneys tend to stick around, or what's the turnover like? I mean, you've been there 25 years, so I'm just curious if that relationship that you've just described is based in large part upon the fact that you have a team that has worked together for a long period of time as well.
Yeah, and it is. My situation is pretty typical. We have very low turnover. In the 25 years that I've been in the office, we typically have very low turnover in our office. Most of the staff in all three of our offices. I mean, we've grown substantially since I started. In the 25 years ago, we've added considerably more personnel, but turnover is very low. Typically, the people who come to work in our office, whether it's attorneys, investigators, paralegals, support staff, everyone tends to stay, and many work for several decades and retire from our office. So, and that really just adds to that teamwork that exists in our office. Everyone knows each other well. Everyone gets along well and works together well, because so many of us have known each other for so long and have worked together for so long.
Do many cases on the federal level go to trial in in this particular district that you work out of?
No, sadly, we don't get many trial cases, and I say sadly because we love a good trial. We love to case that we can go to trial on. But as I mentioned earlier, the cases typically that the United States attorneys bring to federal court, they're very strong cases against our clients, against the defendants. So very few of our cases ever go to trial. Most of them wind up with plea deals, etc. So again, a lot of our work becomes mitigation work, and I really like to look at it as we really like to, and it's so important to put that human side forth in these cases, because so often, I mean, I think typically we human beings tend to see things in a very dualistic way, very black and white, very just good and bad, and everything is simple and cut and dry. But I think rarely does it work that way. There's really a human side to many of the clients that we represent, and it's important to really bring that aspect out for the court and for the judges. I think they often, at least on the federal level, the court and our judges perhaps don't see that human side. They aren't in touch with that human side, and there's always a lot of factors to consider. So a lot of our work is bringing out that human side of our clients, bringing out their story, so that the court and the judge has an opportunity to really hear some of their story about their background and why perhaps they're in the situation that they're in.
I was just saying the other day, as I already said, I've worked for a long time as a prosecutor, and I considered myself a fair prosecutor, but just having done defense work for the last 5 years or so, it really does become very evident, pretty much exactly what you said, that, I don't think, for the most part, I don't think that everyone wakes up in the morning and decides that they're going to, commit a crime. There's always a story. There's always it's not always a defense, but there's always a background on the individual that, as you said, really, if you're able to take the time to try to figure out how the person got to where they are, it humanizes them. And there's a lot of people that I've defended that, when you really sit down and speak with them, you gain a deeper understanding of kind of how they got into the predicament that they got into, and it could be anyone. So I think I hear you when you say that. And I don't do federal work, so you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. But my general understanding is that when there is an agreement, a plea agreement put into place, that there's generally a deferred sentencing where the judge has some discretion under the sentencing guidelines to impose a sentence, and there's time for each side to prepare briefs in support of why the range should be either on the low end or on the high end, depending on which side they're on. So I would imagine that a lot of the work you do is getting information to support a lower range of sentence. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's absolutely accurate, Maggie. So a lot of our work is that way. Ultimately, the sentence is up to the judge, and the federal sentencing guidelines, which are very, very tough, but those guidelines are for the judges to consider, but they're also, of course, able to consider many other factors before imposing their final sentence. So a lot of our work is really digging into that background, digging into the background of the case, and also digging into the background of our clients, their family, their history, and really pulling all kinds of information to really put together a strong picture for the judge to be able to see this person that they're going to be sentencing as a person, not just as a defendant charged in federal court with a criminal offense, but to get to know a little bit more about them and their history and their family, their circumstances and situations. And, and of course, that's not to say, some cases are very tough, and there's no question, there's no defense in the case, and it may be a situation where we know our client is going to be hit with a very, very tough sentence. But in other cases, those federal sentencing guidelines can be very, very harsh. And so a lot of what we do is trying to kind of mitigate and minimize just how impactful, how long that sentence will be for them. And a lot of that is really gathering a lot of that background information to really show that there's a person here as well. There's a human being here, and their circumstances, they have a story, and their circumstances that perhaps have brought them to this. And for example, in a lot of our immigration cases, so many of those are such difficult and such sad cases to work on there, because so many of the clients that we represent in immigration cases, I mean, they're just so many of them are really just trying to make a better life for themselves, and even though they have committed a federal criminal offense just in being in the country or re-entering the country, there's so many factors and so many circumstances to really look at and examine, so much for us to be able to try and get that across to the sentencing judge in their case. So it can be very difficult work. Yeah.
Explain to me how what types of immigration cases specifically your office defends, because and again, this may be a dumb question because I'm not as familiar with the U.S. Code as you are, but all deportation cases are going to be, if the person qualifies for a federal public defender, handled through the Office of the Public Defender, or only those immigration cases that touch upon a related criminal case?
No, so essentially, the majority of the immigration cases that we handle are illegal reentry. So they're individuals who were previously deported and have illegally reentered the country. In some cases, we may have a client who reentered and committed a felony offense of some sort.
On the federal level, you mean, or state or federal?
No, on the state level, often they may have committed a felony offense. They were charged, but then, of course, immigration, ICE comes in and charges them with illegal reentry. So they may have an illegal reentry charge on top of a state felony charge, while others just have a federal reentry charge. They're simply charged with an illegal reentry on the federal level. But we picked any case that ICE picks up for deportation. They come to us because they'll have a detainer through ICE, and they'll have a charge of illegal reentry, and so we wind up representing them on that illegal reentry.
I understand, and that's probably something that's really important for defense attorneys who handle cases on the state level, like me, to be aware of. So I've had clients that I represent on state, New Jersey indictments that have advised me that they have been deported and have, and re-entered.
Yes.
Those individuals that don't have an ICE detainer in place, obviously, you advise the client that they're going to need to consult with an immigration attorney, that there could be a detainer put on them at any time. There was some changes a few years ago with regard to the ability of the state law enforcement to notify ICE, but it's kind of that thing that's always hanging over that person. How if I have any state defense attorneys who are listening, if a defense attorney has a client in that situation, do they typically reach out to federal public defenders? Is that something that you've seen happen in the past? Because that's something that I've seen a lot of defense attorneys kind of glaze over and not really be sure what to do when they have that type of situation.
Okay, so I think most of the time we come in after ICE has already put a detainer on them, so they're already on ICE's radar. They have a detainer on them, and they've been charged, or they've been advised that they're going to be charged with an illegal reentry, and that's typically where we'll come in and pick up the case representing them on that illegal reentry.
Because that's a crime under the U.S. Code.
That's correct. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it's a crime under U.S. Code. So just to re-enter the country illegally, when they're deported, of course, they're advised that they cannot re-enter the country without first obtaining permission from the Department of Homeland Security or from the United States government to re-enter the country. So if they come back, they've automatically re-entered illegally. So normally, ICE. I think very few. It seems like these days are slipping under ICE's radar. So normally they know right away, or they know pretty quickly when someone has re-entered, and they put a detainer on them right away, and they will be charged on the federal level with that illegal re-entry. So we'll come in then and pick up those cases once they're assigned by the court to us.
So your attorneys have to be basically well versed in immigration law.
Yeah, we've really had to more and more over the years. We've had to become much more well versed in immigration law. We ultimately don't represent them on any, if they're trying to raise any issue, for example, trying to remain here by raising an asylum issue. We of course have to advise them that that's going to be in a completely separate court. That's going to be an immigration court. We don't represent them on those things. They will need to consult with an immigration attorney for that. But our attorneys have had to become pretty well versed in with the immigration laws in terms of how they affect us in representing them on the illegal reentry cases. Because of course, once they're charged with an illegal reentry, not only are they ultimately going to be deported again, but they will face a federal sentence for that illegal reentry as part of the sentencing guidelines. That is a federal criminal offense, so they will be sentenced on that case. And what sentence they get depends on a number of different factors. But they will receive a federal prison sentence for the illegal reentry, and they have to complete that sentence before they are deported. Gone are the days when they would be found here illegally just detained and then deported right away. Now, when they're charged with the illegal reentry at the federal level, they're ultimately going to be sentenced on that case. They are going to receive a jail sentence, which they will have to serve before being deported.
Are the guidelines dependent upon the underlying crime that was committed, or what are the ranges for illegal reentry, if you know?
There's a number. It really varies, and it depends on a number of different factors. One of them, of course, the judge will consider how many prior deportations they've had, how many times they've come back to the country. Of course, if their criminal history, as with any charge on the federal level, no matter what the charge is, immigration charges included, their criminal history will come into play. So if they have any prior criminal history other than just being here illegally, then that's certainly going to be a factor. So it can be anywhere from 0 to 6 months, and it can range to several years. There's 2-year mandatory minimums, 5 years. There's even 10 years, depending on those factors.
Wow, that's interesting to know. And I did not realize that they would have to serve that sentence before being deported. Do you know whether or not individuals are assigned counsel in immigration court?
I believe they can request counsel in immigration court, but I'm not 100% sure about that, Meg. I don't know if they the same type of system as in federal criminal court, where they're assigned counsel, or if they have to find some means of getting private counsel to represent them in immigration court.
So you defend immigration cases, the illegal reentries. You mentioned, a few minutes ago that some of the cases that you handle, they range from white collar crime to drug cases, human trafficking. What do you think is the largest percentage of types of cases that your office handles?
Since I started 25 years ago, drugs and guns have always been huge, and drug cases certainly remain a huge percentage of what we handle. But I think in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a huge increase in cases of, for example, child pornography, human trafficking. There's been a huge increase in those cases because the federal government, the U.S. Attorney's Office, really started cracking down on those cases, so made it a kind of a point of emphasis. So we started to get a lot more cases of that type, and the white collar crime, the fraud cases, that's always a pretty large percentage of what we handle as well, and that can be anything from wire fraud, bank fraud, credit card fraud, counterfeiting, and a number of other things. I mean, all kinds of investment fraud, Ponzi schemes, you name it. So that's always been a pretty good percentage of what we do as well. But certainly drug cases and now the child pornography and human trafficking cases, that's really a huge part of what we do now. And of course the immigration cases, which that has only increased in the 25 years that I've been here and just continues to increase.
How about tax evasion cases? Does your office handle those?
Yeah, we still get those types of cases as well. For me, I think I've noticed a decrease in them in the last 5 to 10 years. I haven't seen quite as many as perhaps I would in the beginning of my time at the Federal Defender's Office. That it's decreased somewhat, but we still get tax evasion and tax fraud cases as well. And bank robberies, that has also decreased. I used to see quite a few of those when I began, but at least in the last 10 years, that has decreased dramatically as well.
And just going back to the tax evasion cases, you read about some of these cases where there's been a plea deal put into place and then the sentencing is put off for a period of time. And I always, speculate that perhaps they're trying to allow the defendant to get some funds together to pay back in that interim time frame. But I would imagine that clients that are qualifying for the federal public defender have less of an ability to pay restitution between plea and sentencing. And so that's probably a challenge in terms of, adding weight to that mitigation side of the scale.
Yeah, most of the clients that we represent are unable. They're really unable to pay those fines or restitution. So it becomes less of a factor for them. Sometimes there may be other factors that delay sentencing in federal criminal cases. There may be ongoing investigation. Or other factors. And just on the federal level, cases tend to move much slower than on the state level. I think because there's so much volume on the state level, they have to move them along more quickly. I think on the federal level, they tend to move a bit more slowly because there's a little bit less volume of cases than on the state level.
What are some of the challenges that you face, and have those challenges changed over the 25 years that you have worked as an investigator for the Federal Public Defender's Office?
Oh, wow. There's always a number of challenges. We, of course, our office doesn't have the same kind of resources that our law enforcement counterparts or the U.S. Attorney's Office has. So that's always a challenge for us. We don't have quite the resources that they have. And that makes the job a little bit more challenging, a little bit tougher at times. I think just one of the things is that stigma that has always been there, that reputation that public defenders aren't real attorneys, or they don't quite do really good work, and that's always a challenge and always a frustrating one because as I mentioned, I work with such an amazing group of attorneys and staff that really put their heart and soul into the work that they do and into representing their clients to the best of their abilities. But I think that stigma has always been there, that public defenders aren't quite as perhaps as good or as dedicated as private attorneys, and that's something that has not changed at all in the 25 years that I've been doing this work. That continues. So
well, you hear it on the state level too. I mean, you hear the individuals say, "Oh, I want to hire a real lawyer," and everybody kind of laughs because the public defenders that I've interacted with, at least on the state level, are such dedicated, experienced, defense attorneys, and are oftentimes very, very, very effective for their clients. So
yeah. That's certainly the case at the federal level as well. And but that's always a challenge. But we continue to do what we do and work as hard as we can for our clients to represent them in an outstanding way. So. And then, of course, there's always the challenge of that, the cases are so strong against our clients, as we talked about earlier, that so much of our work is going to be really just about mitigation and just doing what we can to kind of lessen the impact at sentencing for our clients, because they're often, in most of our cases, there's our hands are tied in so many ways. There's not a lot that we can do to defend them in a case and put together a defense strategy that's going to be viable in court at trial, which is why so many of our cases do not go to trial. So that's
yeah. I'm not going to ask you obviously about any cases that you're working on currently, but I'm just curious if there's any a case or cases that you can reflect upon as being that stand out as being maybe perhaps the most rewarding in your 25 years. Putting you on the spot.
Wow.
I'm putting you on the spot here, Orlando.
Yeah, there's been a number of cases. It's hard for me to recall specific ones. There's been a number of cases where certainly. You get that you have that sense of being really rewarded because the hard work really helped the client in a certain way. I mean, we've had our cases over the years, in my 25 years, that went to trial, and we've won a few, and those have always been very rewarding experiences to have a case that went to trial and that we actually were able to win a trial. But even in other cases, just where we were able to get a sentence reduced, something that perhaps a case that at the beginning looked like it was going to be a devastating sentence for a client, and to have an outcome that turned out to be far, far better. We've had a few of those situations. I remember one in particular, without getting into detail on the case, but I don't know if you recall a number of years ago where there was a group of young men that were charged with kind of a conspiracy, a terrorism conspiracy related to Fort Dix military base.
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
We represented one of the clients in that group that was charged there, and we were able to, number one, get our client separated from the other defendants in the case, and ultimately that young man was looking at a significant amount of time the way he was initially being charged, but in the end he was really able to get a sentence that was far, far less than what he was originally looking at. And there was a lot of work that went into that, a lot of circumstances that we had to investigate and look into. But the outcome was extremely rewarding in that case. And it was a situation where he certainly did not deserve to get the kind of, based on the circumstances, he did not deserve to get the kind of time that he was initially potentially looking at. So it was a very rewarding experience to work on that case, and to have the outcome that we did. It was certainly a memorable one for me.
That's great. That's great. Congratulations. How the federal public defender and the U.S. Attorney's Office, they only prosecute adults. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Juveniles typically are not charged on the federal level. That It's extremely rare for something like that to happen. We actually did have a case, and now that you mentioned that, we had a case several years ago, a juvenile that was charged in federal court, and initially the U.S. attorney was looking to charge the young man as an adult, and through a lot of hard work on that case, we were able to ultimately get a favorable outcome for that young man, so that he ultimately was not charged as an adult and did not go to federal prison, to an adult federal prison. He was a young man who made some mistakes, but there was certainly a story there with this young man, and we were able to do a lot of work with him, and come, ultimately get a much more favorable outcome. So, but most typically that's very rare for juveniles to be charged in federal court. Almost all of our clients are adults.
What do you do to kind of make sure you don't get burnt out? I mean, the work that you do is probably got to be very taxing, very draining. You're dealing, with individuals whose basically lives are in the balance at a very, very horrible time in their lives. And you've been doing this for, you said 25 years. What advice do you give other younger investigators or aspiring investigators to continue to be able to do this for an extended period of time without burning out?
Well, it's always extremely helpful to have a team of people around you who work as a team. So we help one another with all of the cases, and it's always good to have that teamwork and to have that camaraderie with the people that you work with. I think that helps immensely in continuing to do this work and not get burned out. I think it's of course, as with any job, it's important to take some time for yourself, vacation time or whatever it may be, to kind of unplug a little bit, because I think we all need that, no matter what we do for a living.
Amen.
And there's certain personal practices that I engage in that really help me to avoid that burnout, and to keep in mind what's important in my life and what's important with work. And to keep myself going in doing this work. But never be afraid to reach out to your colleagues and to get help from your colleagues whenever you need that. Of course, hopefully you're in a situation as I'm fortunate to be in where I work with excellent colleagues where we have that teamwork and we're able to rely on one another and I think help each other from getting burned out from the work that we do.
Now, you're so gracious, and I'm sure that your colleagues are very, very happy and fortunate to have had you work alongside of them for so many years. And I think the sentiments that you're expressing right now translate probably to just about every career. But certainly the work that you do, kind of being on the front lines of helping people, is. It sounds like those are words of wisdom for sure for the work that you have done.
Thanks, Meg.
Orlando, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today on New Jersey Criminal Podcast. The federal system has always been a little bit mysterious to me because I haven't ever, set foot in a federal courtroom. So I was so thrilled to be able to have the opportunity to pick your brain a little bit about the work that your office does, right up the road in Camden, and serving the citizens of our community. So thank you again, and I'd love to stay in touch with you. And if you're ever down in the Ocean City area, give a shout, and maybe we can catch up in person.
Thank you so much, Meg. I really appreciate it. Thank you again for having me on. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. And a quick shout out to your wonderful intern, Grace, who helped make this happen. So shout out to her. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to miss her. She definitely had a hand in this one. So thank you again.
Thank you, Meg. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance. The best way to follow, subscribe, rate, or message the show is to visit njcriminalpodcast.com.